Yo, what's up, Real World Alliance or Realworldiacs, which still cracks me up. I don't know why. Oh, such a good title. I was watching some videos today, catching up while smoking a nice Boston butt and some chicken breast for tomorrow for a football type party. You know how I am. I'm not there for the football, but I'm there for the food, even if I'm making it. But yeah, I just trying to catch up with some videos here and there. Kari, good to hear from you as always. I caught that you did some editing on the real world time slot. Thank you for those additions. Third best game, baby, and rising potentially. I mean, at least that's your opinion of it. We haven't actually thrown it into the mix to the masses for people to tear apart, but we'll see what happens. Um, Yeah, so I know there's a lot to catch up on what usually happens. Like, it seems like people will do some videos and there's response videos that go up and, you know, just something to watch in the background. On the one hand, it's like, there's so much to catch up with. On the other hand, it's like, you gotta figure, like, when you're watching a show or something like that, you don't gotta wait the week or two to catch the next episode. It's like, oh, you've got episodes on backlog. And on the one hand, overwhelming. On the other hand, it's like, you got content to consume, so not necessarily a bad thing, excuse me. Um, Sean, I was catching your videos. I definitely had some interesting thoughts, or not, I would say my thoughts were interesting. I thought it was interesting and had some thoughts about what you were saying, like with Bash and everything like that. Like, him like on the DM side of things, like having favorite NPCs and stuff, like, or at least what do you want to say favorite, like favored ones, like ones that you really enjoy. Which I think like as a DM, that's I explained this to my girlfriend with like the way real world works is unless there's other people around, it's like as the DM, like you are, it's like as a role player, like you're a one player character. As the DM, you are an infinite amount of player characters. You are the world around you. You are technology. You are life. You are everything and anything. Like you are responsible for everything that's around a player or a group of players. So it's like as a role player, you can, you definitely have, characters you've been attached to. So as a DM, I think it's only natural to have like certain NPCs that you're kind of attached to, like from a role, like a role playing type perspective. So I definitely get you on like that. Like, yeah, and it's a shame, like if if that NPC dies, or I think even worse than death sometimes is like that NPC comes and then goes and then is forgotten about, that he just kind of does his or her own thing out there, and no one ever gets to see or hear about it, even though you thought it was a pretty nifty story. On the bright side, because players don't know about it, like that means you can recycle it later if you wanted, and they'll never be any wiser. Uh, yeah, yeah, but like with Mr. Bash and everything like that. I don't remember if I remember him personally or not. I feel like I met him on Alternus, I want to say, and again, there was that whole thing where I'm starting to get the impression that Alternus and his group of evil people, not they weren't necessarily evil people. I mean, Ty and Jeff might have been a little on the evil side, but Alternus viewed himself as a hero. And I mean, I specifically remember like he had confrontations with the demon that gave him his hellspawn armor, and he was like, "Yeah, no, I'm not following your path. Like I'm walking my own path." So like he was definitely not evil. He had very evil origins, but like again, it was that interesting thing of your origins do not define you, your actions do. But yeah, like the crew fought them. I can't remember, is Mr. Bash part of the crew? I feel like he was. But yeah, the crew were fighting our crew, and I said our crew probably did some terrible stuff, but it was more of a result of Jeff and Ty being super hot headed, and anyone who said anything that might have upset them, their first response was, "Well, I hit him DM," which you gotta respect that at a certain level, but probably not the best policy to get yourself through life, and might also attract the attention of the crew like that. But yeah, like I said, that was definitely interesting to hear on the DM slash vessel side of things. Like the way I always kind of look at that is like as like a DM, like it's like the vessel can certainly appreciate stuff, and like even like the DM can have something that he or she is kind of interested in, and there's always that tricky line to walk between like I said, the kind of that not necessarily an unspoken rule, but like kind of it's a established rule. Like you don't give away like all the inner workings of the universe unless a player learns about it. Um, which is why intelligence is such an everything stat. I said, and this is something that I'll speak on Unleashed for a moment. Like I know I've said to a couple of the players now, is intelligence is a little bit more. I don't want to say a little bit more important. I said I feel like it's definitely important in Unleashed because the DM pretty much lets you get away with like whatever you as a player want to come up with as far as stuff goes. Like obviously if as long as it's not like outside the game information, but like if you're a low intelligence character and you come up with a solution to the problem, the DM isn't likely to be like, player, you're too dumb to come up with that. Like you might have a moment of brilliance or something like that, because like the DM isn't going to judge that. But what intelligence specifically does for you inside of Unleash, beyond like learning and absorbing information and like being able to pick things out, is it strengthens the conduit between the DM's perception of the world and your player's perception of the world. So the DM is there to provide you with information about what's going on around you, and your intelligence, if it's high enough, will basically like kind of get you. I don't want to say favors with the DM, but it would be more like additional information. Like if you were to go up to a ledge and try to make a jump across it, you could certainly try it, but like if you have a high enough intelligence, the DM will probably give you a better like oh player, you feel like in your past you've made a jump this far, if not further, so you could definitely made it, or player, you feel like this would be outside your realm of your capability. So it's like it kind of strengthens the connection between the player and the DM and the way the world is perceived to them. So like things like awareness and stuff like that, yeah, like you might miss some stuff, but like things that you might do that would be counterintuitive to what your character would like kind of like that self-preservation thing, like there's always those things that people like players do that we all do, where it's like really like what do you do, player? Like intelligence is kind of a check against that. Like the higher your intelligence, like you might get one or two times per session where the DM will step in and say, actually player, that's actually a pretty terrible idea. Like you think you thought about it and it's like, oh, you realize based on this and this that in your past. And it's like I said, it's not like the DM trying to help you out. It's just trying to make sure that connection between the character and the world that they are in is stronger. Like the DM does his best to provide the information to allow you to make the best choice that your character feels they could make. But on the other hand, it's like there's sometimes it's just like something happens where there's a miscommunication, or there's like you see the situation differently. Like, and it gets really hard when you like start to deal with like the more metaphysical or like the more abstract concepts, like in real world, like dealing with energies or powers or techniques, or like even how you like see someone throwing a punch at you. Like you might see a person launching themselves through the air in a certain way, whereas the DM sees it very differently. So it's like intelligence kind of helps to bridge that gap, at least in Unleashed. So that's something to keep in mind. Boy, that was really off track from where I started. Uh, yeah, with Mr. Bash and everything like that, like it was interesting to hear like Sean said he views him as like this really like noble type hero, whereas like some people have said like, oh, he comes off as a little high and mighty, or maybe even like sanctimonious, where it's like, and then I think that's like there's an interesting dichotomy that exists within comics and stuff like that, whereas like what's the famous quote, or one of the Batman quotes or something like that, is like if you kill one murderer, it doesn't change. It's like if you kill a murderer, it doesn't change the amount of murderers in the world. And like that's why he doesn't kill. And it's like on the opposite side of that, it's like, yeah, but if you kill a whole bunch of murderers, you've significantly reduced the populations of murderers, even though you've added +1 to the pool. So it's like if you stop at one, yes, you basically broke even. So it's kind of short-sighted. But then again, like you're also talking about like human life and the act of taking a life. So like there's some heaviness that weighs there. That's something like I said, I think like with the whole Bash dynamic, and even like then like the idea of like Superman, like he's big on that, like where following the law to the order, whereas like Batman's more the vigilante type, like let due process do its course, whereas like Batman's more likely to go out there and like punch people's faces in. And like I said, I don't think there's a right or wrong one. It's like just your own personal moral compass. What you like, what's an acceptable loss? What's ends justifying the means, stuff like that. And like, where some people might see Bash as being like sanctimonious or holier than thou. Other people might see him as like kind of a beacon for positivity, like where he has his own moral code where he basically refuses to break it because he feels like if he does break it, then he will be less of who or what he is, like, and what he stands for. Like, oh, and like what Sean had got into with All Might, like that. Like, All Might is pretty awesome. And like, man, Sean, if I know you're strapped for time always, but get into that latest season because there are some awesome fights. Like All Might has some real, like, I would say up there with Rock Lee's transformation type fights. Like, they're everything. Like, they're just chills through your body when you're watching it. Really good. And that's without try not to spoil anything or anything like that because you always expect people to fight and stuff. But yeah, it was awesome. Watch My Hero Academia if you haven't. But yeah, that's kind of with the whole Bash thing. Now, on the on the goofy side, like, Mr. Bash is no fist in your jaw, man. That's all I can say. Because fist in your jaw, like, I don't know about you, but like, I've never heard of Mr. Bash pulling out a piano after he puts his fist in your jaw, and serenade you with a song about how he put his fist in your jaw. Because that's just like some classical level stuff, like Renaissance painting masterpiece, like from one of the masters level, where this guy pulls this piano out of the ether and starts serenading you. And it's like, the scary part of it was, whatever the DM described it, like, I can kind of picture this, like, kind of the tune that went along with it. Like, I don't, and I'm not saying this to disparage the DM. Like, I don't remember the DM actually describing the tune well, but like, I always envisioned in my mind it was like one of those ones where it was just a couple notes here and there, and it was like it would kind of flutter from one thing to the other. Like, like you play like one strong note, another strong note, and then there's like a kind of a couple lighter notes. Like, it wasn't overly dramatic, but it was just very like a very relaxed piano medley. Like, it wasn't complicated or anything like that. It wasn't like any of the nutty flutterings of fingers or anything. It was just, anyway, like, not that it was overly simplistic. That's more thought than I probably should put into the piano that Fist in Your Jaw Man pulled out whenever he punched one of my characters or one of our characters in our group. I can't remember if it was me specifically, but man, I've tried to dodge Fist in Your Jaw Man. I'm worried Fist in Your Jaw Man might be dead because I don't think he ever came after Omen, and I know he hasn't come after Kaz yet. I'm kind of worried for him. But yeah, Fist in Your Jaw Man is hilarious, and man, it always really hurts too. It's like, oh my god, my jaw. But yeah, Sean's there talking about like his Mr. Bash. That's just one of those ones, like, how like movies have that where like they prop up like this character is to be like the everything character that people like latch on to. Not even everything like powerful, but just like whether it's backstory or something like that. Like, it's their personality. Like, oh yeah, people, you can tell the author really liked that character, and then here's your dumb PC players latching on to Flip the Two-Day Jedi and talking about him, 15 years later, even though he was in one session for like 30 seconds, or like Jimbo the Blue Ape. It's like, you just know, you can never know what the players are going to latch onto, and man, players are dumb. I say that being the player that latched onto those two characters, so I'm not coming at you guys, I'm coming at myself more. But yeah, what can you do with that? It was definitely, like I said, I definitely liked hearing a little bit about Mr. Bash. I wish, like I said, I think he's a member of the crew, but if anyone can clarify, that'd be awesome, because I think we're thinking about the same person. And yeah, that was something else I was gonna say, was basically on the inner, or the behind the scenes stuff of Real World, and what the players perceive, and like the whole aspect of mystery and stuff like that. Like, it's good, but it's also frustrating because, like, whenever you read a book or you watch a movie, it's like you get through the three acts and then there's an outcome that happens. If your favorite character dies, you get to see what happens after they die. You know, you still see the outcome. Like if they die a heroic death, and you know, to kind of get them to allow someone else to push over the line, you still get to see that play out. In real world, that doesn't happen. Like, you know, you can have mystery like that, and like Zeratul, well, that was very much Zeratul's story for me. Was I never got to see the outcome of his actions or inaction, or how badly he may have screwed things up. Who knows? And like I said, there's a lot of mystery surrounding it, but like it's also a mystery that's left not satiated. Like that you never get to find out what happens, and like that's frustrating. I mean, it sucks, but like you know, that's also the way life is. Like you don't, you know, you get to you're born, you live, you die. You don't get to find out what happens after you die. Like when your story stops, it stops. Um, you know, barring any kind of like afterlife or anything like that. But you know what I mean? Like just like from a general perspective, like you know, when you don't always get to know everything that happens, or you don't get to know like people's thoughts or intentions in real world. Like that's kind of the mystery to it. Whereas like with fiction or like you know literature, movies, and everything like that, a lot of times you do get to uncover those things eventually. Like in real world, like there's a very real possibility you just never find out what was like. You know, was the herald a good guy? Was he a bad guy? These are the things that keep me up at night. Which I guess that's not the worst thing to have, you know, as far as like problems and issues. But you know, it's just something you definitely think about. Um, but yeah, like I said, like other areas of imaginative release, we'll call them, like fiction or like literature, movies, media, stuff like that. Like real world can leave you left in the dark, kind of thing. Like whenever your character lives, comes and dies, or like even just moves on from an area, like you don't know what happens. So there's definitely a bit of a split there. Like on the one hand, like it definitely leaves you wanting more. You know, on the other hand, it's like, man, I wish I'd have ever been able to find out what happened. And sometimes you may never find out what happened. Like even with the story with Zeratul and stuff like that. Like I think from when I've talked to some people, like parts of it still might be going on today. I mean, obviously it has nothing to do with him at this point, but like I forget. I think it was it Keith I was talking to? Maybe it was Keith. No, I think it was maybe Timer. Not that I get you guys mixed up. I was trying to remember which conversation it was about generations we were having. Because I know I talked to both of you guys. Was about like what Legacy had did, like this whole Ascension thing, and how it brought back all these powerful people. And I said like I think it was I'm going to say this time here. I think he said like you know it only brought like these significantly powerful people. And I said, well, you know, it'd be interesting if it was kind of like a Bleach aspect where, and I know you didn't watch Bleach, but I had watched enough of it where what happens is like whenever souls die, like there's these hollow creatures like that basically are amalgamations of people's souls, and it's like powerful people tend to like absorb up the little souls around them. So it's like maybe there's something like that in Generations where I don't know, that's just kind of a in the dark shot in the dark leap. But it's like maybe that's why you don't see everyone returning, just like these people of significant power. It's like whenever you see like in Bleach, like the hollows, like there's these giant hollows that have absorbed hundreds of thousands of souls, you know, and they're just, you know, sometimes like there's a soul that rises to the top with their personality, and that's like when you get some of the main villains, and then like there's the ones that are just kind of like amalgamations that are kind of like more like lifeless monsters that are just driven by like baser instincts. So I'm sure that's not what it was, but like it was just kind of an interesting thought, like what Legacy's consequence was. And like that was the other thing we were talking about, like what the heck is he even ascended to? Like what's he trying to accomplish? Is he trying to accomplish, and is he trying to end the universe? Because that would suck. I really like my character, and just have the universe randomly end someday when he finishes this process. But yeah, we'll see what happens, or maybe we won't. That's just the nature of things. But yeah, like that was definitely there was one other thing I wanted to talk a little bit about, which I'm sure this is already way too long, but you know how it is. Like with Sean's idea of like him being the good guy, or like him as a person being the good guy, but like the justice system largely fails. Like I think like that's something that like everyone has their own kind of perception of like how they are in the world, like whether they're I think most people kind of think of themselves as the good guy, even if they're doing like questionable things. Like, you know, you look at history, like some pretty monstrous acts have been committed, but like I don't think people thought like that there was some good in their acts, which is just kind of how we are as people. But like I said, like, you know, I know from like my perception of things, like, yeah, I think of myself as a good guy too. Like, but like I think of the, like, when I look at like the justice and things like that, like I see it more as the system isn't perfect and it does fail, but it doesn't overwhelmingly fail, which, like I said, just might be different, like, you know, a different perspective. Like I look at it as where we've come from to where we are. It's like we are making progress, but we're not like perfect. We're not universally, you know, obviously there's a lot of room for improvement in a lot of different areas, and we certainly could do better, but, you know, and there are some things that we do that need like some definite like to go back to the drawing board on. Uh, but yeah, that was like the whole thing. Like what I had in mind with that was like, you know, my dad worked at he was a major at the correctional facility around here, and you know, it's like you look at the idea of prisons going from cutting people's arms off, you know, to incarceration, like basically time. And the original premise of it was probably pretty good, where it's like you basically take time away from society to like to pay your dues for the crimes that you've committed. Like, you know, you're paying with a portion of time, but it's like now it's kind of gotten to the point where it's like you're making people worse for doing it as opposed to making them better. Like, you know, and it's like statistically pretty much proven that you spend like even limited amounts of time in prison, you tend to like come out worse off than you were before. So it's like the original idea of going from cutting off someone's hand to taking away their time so that they can contribute better to society. Like, I guess like the original thing would be like rehabilitation. Like, rehabilitation doesn't happen anymore. Like you know, it makes you worse going there. So it's like the original premise was good, but, you know, like we probably need to go back to the drawing board and kind of reevaluate how we deal with like criminal actions. I forget how I got on this topic. Oh yeah, it was like with Sean saying like how he views things. And I said that was definitely something that kind of was touched on, like with the whole Batman thing of you kill a murderer the same amount of, like, you don't change the amount of murderers in the world. It's like there's definitely a certain moral compass that exists for each individual, and like each one's a little different. And then some are vastly different. Like, I don't know if you guys, it's I don't know, like, I hesitate to recommend this one. I don't think a lot of people would enjoy it, but like The Handmaid's Tale, it's on Hulu. Like, man, is it messed up. Like, it's a hard to watch show a lot of times. But like the overarching premise of the show, without like spoiling anything, is that the like it's set in like in the near future, whereas like our destruction of the planet has got to a point where things have gotten bad. Human birth rate is plummeting, like where it dropped like 60% in 6 months and then got worse from there. Like, there are countries that haven't seen like a live viable birth within like a 12-month period. Like Mexico is one of the ones that are mentioned. So America is basically overthrown by like these Christian fundamentalists. And the original premise of some of the people who founded it are to basically make sure that like people that are fertile, which, you know, women are fertile, are reproducing, like are producing like offspring and stuff like that. Because, you know, it's like, as it is now, it's like you have that choice, like, you know, whether or not you want to have kids or not. But like, we're also at a point where we have a population boom. Like, we're not hurting for people, but like, you know, whether you want to go out and work or you want to have a more social life and not have kids, like, you know, it's not a prerogative to have kids. But in this near distant, or in this near future, like, it becomes a prerogative. So what they end up doing is like stripping all of women's rights away, and they go back to, like, what they do is like they justify everything they do through like a biblical means. Like, they really twist some stuff up. But like, it's one of those ones where, you know, they also like, the United States, or the new United States, is basically unique within the world, but is the only one. It's like one of the only countries that has a viable birth rate. Like, that they are, you know, they are increasing their numbers, not increasing, but like they are sustaining their numbers, and then like they've cut back on all this pollution and stuff like that. But it's at the cost of like women losing all their rights. We're talking like medieval kind of stuff, like where if they're caught reading, they lose a finger. Like, it was originally a hand, and they lose a finger, I think, if you're caught reading for their first offense. So it's some very eye for an eye kind of thing. But very messed up show, but like an interesting, like it's one of those ones like I think I talked to Sean about this where what's it called, the 100 on the CW. Like I hate CW shows, like, and I don't say that like to be disparaging. It's just like I feel like that they fall into these really formulaic things about, you know, like you I think Tamir was even talking about this, like the consistency of people's powers. Like, oh yeah, you go out there one day and you hit this guy, and it's like you're, and then all of a sudden you're worried about, oh, it's like Spider-Man getting like hugged by Kingpin is what the example he used. And it's like that shouldn't hurt Spidey. Like Spidey's durability and Spidey's strength is nowhere near a Kingpin. And when we went and looked up on like the Marvel database, like yeah, Spider-Man puts up like 15 to 25 tons in his like more powerful state, whereas like Kingpin like tops out at like 800 pounds for lift weight. It's like you're not hurting Spidey that way. But yeah, like I said, CW I think kind of suffers from that like continuity of their shows. But the 100 creates what the same thing that the Handmaid's Tale creates. It creates a very interesting like dynamic, or what's it called, like a very interesting setting. So it's like you, like for some of those shows, like I'm more interested in the setting and then how the characters act out in them as opposed to the characters themselves. Whereas like, you know, some shows are like, oh, about the Flash, like yeah, you're watching about the Flash, but you could care less about the Flash's universe because it's pretty goofy. But like the shows like the 100, the Handmaid's Tale, it's like you really start to care about the universe. Which, tying this back into Real World, because I went off on a tangent, is like I think that's something like for some people, like being able to see like that's the thing with Cass is like you know, I think I started Real World, especially in Generations, as a someone who wanted to be powerful and to go out there and like be the hero. Whereas like I started to, as I've kind of grown, like I appreciate the environment more, the setting, the social setting, the like learning about that like my people were like these racist Nazi type people that you know, it's like you're like you kind of get to experience it on a much deeper level. And I'm not saying that level wasn't there before. So like I said, that's one of those ones I always go back to the my ratings of Generations, and I feel like I missed the mark on that somehow because, and like I said, maybe it was just the gap between playing in Generations like back in the college days, and maybe a couple real world cons where I was like the movies didn't, like the movies were good, but like I didn't think they. Or not discounting the last one. I think like the movies before that, like they were good, but again, they were slightly sabotaged by the players. But like Karee's movie, I think really resonated with me. I was like, oh, like Karee is an awesome DM. Like that, the Maze movie that he did was top notch. Like that was I was like, oh, that was really good. And yeah, so as I said, like and it's what I said, might be one of those ones like the fog of memory and stuff like that. But like the more I've played in Generations, I'm like, wow, like, you know, I really kind of missed the mark with my ratings. I'm not saying he's, you know, Generations is better than one game or another, but like it's definitely either it's stepped its game up considerably, or like I've just gotten a better like being steeped back into it, I've appreciated a lot more. And I said that's kind of the thing with Cass is that environment that he's in, like the political factions that go along with it, like the two different sides to things, you know, like the moral grays that exist there, like the characters that are kind of coming out of it, like even like finding out that the guy that called us down here, like the big reason he called us down here wasn't like this magnanimous, like let's clear the divide. It's like his son is one of the afflicted people, and it's like that's much more human, like, you know, than hey, let's bridge the gap. It's like no, I'm still self-serving. Like I could be a good guy and everything like that, but so like that kind of stuff gets me. Like that's just one of those signs to me of like, man, top notch. And I probably rambled way too long here. You guys will probably end up with a half-hour video or something like that and be like, oh my gosh, why? I was just almost caught up. So we'll kind of wrap it up there with that thought. But yeah, like I said, that's something with you know, at least with Generations like that I've really been impressed with. And I know someone might chagrin whenever I speak on such with such praise to the game like that. But no, like, and I'm not saying it's improved, but I'm saying it's possibly improved, but also my perspective has improved of it. So it's like maybe, you know, a little wiser with age, stuff like that. So yeah, hey DM, looking forward to that next session. All right, I'm gonna cut out there.